Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you very much for joining us here today. Let me introduce the folks I have here on stage. First of all, Massachusetts State Police Colonel Rick McEwen is with us. Special Agent in Charge Matt Etry from Homeland Security Investigations for New England. State Police Detective Lieutenant Mary McCauley, who for years oversaw human trafficking investigations in this office. Deb Berkovich, Chief of my Human Trafficking Division. Nikki Antonucci, Chief of my Victims Witness Services Division. Lowell Police Chief William Taylor and Captain Kevin Sullivan. Detective Sergeant Scott Mills of the Auburn Police Department. Sergeants Lynn Rombley and Patricia Carey of the Revere Police Department. Sergeant Matt Early and Detective Christian Chabot of the Worcester Police Department. Lisa Goldblatt-Grace from My Life, My Choice. Sherry Jimenez from the EVA Center, and Dakia Warren from Demand Abolition. In addition, I want to thank state troopers assigned to the Attorney General's Human Trafficking Unit, prosecutors Jen Snook, Nancy Rothstein, Gina Kwan, Dave Clayton, and victim witness advocates Becky Eld and Megan Murphy, who together work day in and day out on these investigations and cases in our office. Together working with so many from law enforcement at the state, local, and federal level. Today, I am so pleased to be joined by our partners in law enforcement, survivor groups, and advocacy organizations who all share a common goal, that of ending human trafficking and the exploitation of people here in Massachusetts. Over the last few years, we have been hard at work in the Attorney General's office, doing all that we can to combat this crime. And we have been joined in this effort by district attorneys' offices, local police, federal prosecutors, and investigators in this fight. Together, we are working to bring investigations, bring cases to end human trafficking. We've prosecuted pimps and traffickers across the state and have worked with our partners to educate and inform the public about the many forms human trafficking and sexual servitude take. We've offered assistance to victims who need any number of emotional and physical supports to overcome the trauma that they've experienced. But trafficking persists, and that is a message here today, to raise awareness of how pernicious and pervasive human trafficking is across the state and across this country, and to share our shared commitment to ending this terrible, terrible scourge. By shedding light on the many forms trafficking takes, it is our hope that we can end this exploitation once and for all. Today, I am announcing that we have indicted 5 individuals on human trafficking charges. These individuals, located in various regions of Massachusetts, use different schemes to traffic women. But each of them exploited vulnerable women and profited from that exploitation. In one case, a trafficker in Lowell lured women using fentanyl, then dropped them off one by one to solicit and engage in sex acts on the street. He took advantage of these women who were desperately struggling with substance use, keeping them hooked daily on these deadly opioids while padding his pockets with cash. He even set a quota for how many men they had to have sex with each day. In another case, a man and a woman recruited women online to engage in sex acts in hotels in Worcester and Middlesex counties, promising payments of up to $12,000. In yet another case in the Revere area, a man and a woman trafficked women through a so-called online escort service. They photographed these women, they posted their images on websites, and then they set up meetings one by one for them to meet with men to provide sex for money. Their business was not anything more than a front for human trafficking. Now, each of these scenarios is different, but there is one overall theme. Traffickers prey on vulnerable women and profit from their exploitation. My partners here from the survivor and advocacy organizations can attest, no young woman chooses this willingly. Many of these women found themselves in dire financial situations, lured in by the promise of compensation, support, security, a roof over their head. But after engaging in multiple sex acts with multiple men, they received no such money. The traffickers kept it all. Many of these women suffer and have suffered and been the victims of child abuse, sexual abuse, domestic violence, relationship violence, have suffered and endured countless acts of physical, mental, financial oppression and coercion, things and circumstances that made them particularly vulnerable to the predatory acts of pimps and traffickers. I want to be clear about this because I want people in this state to understand the very real face of victims and survivors of human trafficking. There's a commonly held misperception out there that women willfully choose to engage in what is sometimes called the world's oldest profession. But that's simply not true. Little girls grow up wanting to be many things. They don't dream about careers locked up in hotel rooms and motel rooms, selling their bodies as commodities, forced to endure the gravest indignities. It's simply not the case. And unfortunately, there are too many people out there who prey on these women, who have women backed into the corner, women where there is nowhere else to go and no one to rely on. People victimized by these egregious crimes have not chosen this path for themselves. The consequences are so staggering. Statistics show that women in this life are continually raped, physically assaulted, and suffer from PTSD at significant levels higher than that experienced by even combat veterans. This is not, to be clear, an issue of consensual sex among adults. As we have seen from case after case, pimps and traffickers regularly target our most vulnerable members of society. Tragically, right now in this country, the average age of girls forced into the sex trade is between 12 and 14 years old. As I mentioned, many of these people are dealing with serious addiction issues, sexual assault, and physical abuse or domestic violence. Some are recent immigrants to this country, struggling to make their way and support their families. We know that here in Massachusetts and across this country, human trafficking takes many various forms. And we stand here today united to say that we will not tolerate it in any form. We will continue to work with our great partners in law enforcement, like the ones we have here today, to aggressively investigate and prosecute and hold accountable traffickers. I want to applaud the administration, Governor Baker, Lieutenant Governor Polito, and their announcement earlier this week to create a new unit that will focus specifically on addressing the exploitation of minors. We have prosecuted cases with child victims, as have district attorneys' offices, and provided training on minor sex trafficking investigation techniques to law enforcement. We will continue to do this work, and we look forward to working together collectively to protect our children from being brought into this horrible life. We will continue also to work with our survivor organizations to improve access and delivery of services to survivors. These organizations have wonderful and amazing people working with them on the front lines, working with people, victims and survivors who are in desperate need of services. It may be housing, it may be in recovery, access to health care, educational services, you name it. Their needs are great. And we will continue to work with organizations like Demand Abolition and others to reduce the demand for commercial sex that drives this industry. If there are no buyers, folks, there is no business. We must end demand. It's as simple as that. To those who buy sex, I want to send a message. Human trafficking is not a victimless crime. Behind every one of these women, and they're not all women, but the majority are women, and behind every one is somebody's mother, sister, or daughter. I want people who would think about engaging in the purchase of sex to really understand what is happening and to understand that they are dealing with a person who has been the victim of the most predatory of practices, is not there by her own volition, is not enjoying this, and it's simply not right. That is a message that I think we need to send here in the Commonwealth, and that is something that we will continue to talk about as an office. Again, I want to thank the many investigators, police and troopers who work together on these particular matters. And I want to thank all in the Commonwealth who do this work, investigators, prosecutors, and the advocacy organizations, and our victim witness advocates who work collaboratively and tirelessly to bring about justice and to hold those accountable who would perpetrate this terrible exploitation. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you the Colonel of the State Police, Rick McEwen.
Thank you, General. Thank you all. I just have some brief comments, but I do want to speak to this important issue. And one of the most important priorities of any police department is protection of the most vulnerable members of society. Many of them are young women who are victimized by human trafficking. Human trafficking is a crime that lurks in the shadows. The perpetrators prey on victims who often come from troubled situations. These victims often have no support systems and can see no other alternatives. The traffickers count on those young women not cooperating with the police. But by ensuring that we support those victims, we can give them a safety they need to break the cycle of abuse, cooperate with our investigation, and take the perpetrators off the street. These cases worked by state troopers in several units, including a superb investigative unit here at Attorney General Healy's office. We are dedicated to working with our partners in this office and other agencies to bring the perpetrators to justice and to bring justice to their victims. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Colonel, and I really deeply appreciate all of the support you have provided to this effort on behalf of so many vulnerable victims, and we look forward to working with you and with the additional resources directed at this effort. So thank you again, Colonel. Now at this time, I'd like to introduce Special Agent in Charge Matt Etrie from Homeland Security Investigations, another terrifically important partner in this effort.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I want to thank the AG for inviting us here today, and I also want to thank her office's Human Trafficking Unit, the Massachusetts State Police, the local police forces here, and of course the special agents from ICE Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, for what they do in combating human trafficking each and every day here in the state of Massachusetts. Taking a holistic approach to enforcement and victim identification, each department has brought their expertise and field practitioners together to make a difference and ensure the best possible outcome for these cases. HSI is very proud to have collaborated with our partners back in 2012 on the very first state human trafficking case under the Massachusetts human trafficking legislation. We continue that commitment. HSI has worked tirelessly with our partners to bring our resources to bear, pursuing those traffickers identified here in the state of Massachusetts and beyond these borders, those who prey on the weak and vulnerable. Because ultimately, it doesn't matter if the traffickers are targeting a victim from Thailand to Taunton, from Estonia to East Boston. The impact on the victim can be just as traumatizing. That's why, as an agency, HSI employs a victim-centered approach that views the rescuing of victims as one of our highest priorities. HSI's primary goal in pursuing these types of cases is to end this form of modern-day slavery and bring victims out of the shadows, in collaboration with our law enforcement partners and our non-government organizations, and of course, pursuing prosecutions through the Attorney General's office and the U.S. Attorney's office. So I want this to be a warning to those who feel they can sexually exploit the vulnerable members of our community here in Massachusetts. HSI and its partners will use every tool at our disposal to identify you, bring you to justice, and help rescue those victims still trapped in the shadows. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Lisa Goldblatt Grace from My Life by Choice.
Good afternoon. At My Life, My Choice, we've been working since 2002 as a survivor-led organization to end the commercial sexual exploitation of children, to provide services to those being exploited now, and to change the climate for those growing up in the future. Of the 143 girls, boys, and transgender youth that we served last year, they came from all communities throughout Greater Boston. We served kids as far west as Worcester, as far north as Salem and Lynn and Lawrence and Lowell, and down south to the Cape, to Brockton, to Taunton, Fall River, Attleboro, and every community in between, Framingham and Wayland and Millis and Belmont and Brookline. The kids that we served, the average age that they got into the sex industry mirrors the national statistics that the Attorney General spoke of. So that was 14 years old was the average age that they got brought into the sex industry. 80% of them were involved with our Department of Children and Families. So what we're talking about are the most vulnerable kids in our communities. So this multi-billion-dollar industry is targeting and focusing on our most vulnerable. And together with our partners here, law enforcement and service providers, and with the extraordinary leadership of the Attorney General, we're fighting back. We're working with young victims as they go from being a victim to a survivor, and from a survivor to a leader. And again, we're grateful for the Attorney General's leadership in this area as we move forward to make things better for all kids in the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sherry. Lisa, forgive me, but now we will hear from Sherry, who comes to us from the EVA Center.
Thank you. So I'm here as a survivor, as the director of the EVA Center, which is an exit program that helps women out of this sex trade. Ending sexual exploitation, all systems of prostitution, requires a collaboration between law enforcement, programs such as ours, and a number of community partners. We're all working to end sexual exploitation that preys on the most vulnerable, and we want to create a culture where it's not permitted or accepted to sexually exploit or purchase the body of another person. People's rights will not be denied or violated for economic reasons anymore. We are shutting these systems down, offering women and girls a way out. And we will continue to work together. So I applaud the Attorney General's office, and we still have a lot of work to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Dakir Warren from Demand Abolition.
Good afternoon. I want to start by thanking the Attorney General and members of the Auburn, Lowell, Worcester, and Revere Police Departments for their amazing work. Going after traffickers is hugely important in ending commercial sexual exploitation, and increased cooperation like you've heard about today is crucial. But I think it's important to note that it's about more than just going after traffickers. If we want to end this issue in our communities, when we look at these cases, each being unique, they all have one thing in common: the buyers. In every one of these instances, it was the buyers who put money in the hands of pimps and traffickers, incentivizing them to run their criminal networks. And for every pimp, there are hundreds of buyers. In Boston alone, we know that there are over 10,000 ads posted every month on Backpage, a site where a lot of trafficking is brokered. Each ad gets an average response of 46 from sex buyers who are fueling this inherently exploitative market. Without the buyers, all of this stops. Quite simply, no buyers, no business. This is why Demand Abolition is working alongside the Attorney General's office to increase social and legal pressure faced by the men who choose to buy sex and exploit vulnerable populations for their own gratification. Thank you.
Thanks, Dakir. At this time, we'll take questions about this topic.